Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Tea with Ann Marie. I am your host, Ann Marie Sorrell, and I am here to spill the tea on all things business, politics, and community happenings. I've missed you guys. It's been about 2 weeks since I've been on. I had to take a little break and do a little staycation. I didn't do much of a staycation. I'm sure many of you can relate. I was working the whole time that I was on said staycation, but neither here nor there. I would love to welcome a very special guest and a good friend of mine, fellow author, Mr. Adrian Carter. I'm going to bring him on. Hi, Adrian.
How are you? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited to be here. I'm happy. Doing
Good,
great.
good. Well, I'm glad you're here. Now, can you hear my hopefully, the landscapers decide to come today and make all this noise as soon as I start the show. Isn't that something?
It's all right though. I can't really hear anything.
Okay, good. All right. So welcome to Tea with Ann Marie. As you know, we talk about business, politics, community happenings. So on previous episodes, I've interviewed other business owners, political figures, and just community leaders. So today I have the opportunity to introduce you, who is an author, a business owner, an educator, founder of a men's conference. I mean, you got so much going on right now. Why don't you just introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us about who is Adrian Carter.
First, thank you for having me on. You called me on a very good day. I'm happy. I am ecstatic. I already mentioned why, because I'm making gains in the paper that I'm working on. I'm a doctoral student, as you know, getting my PhD in conflict resolution studies, and author of a new book, Let's Get Married and Do Everything Except Make It Last. And the Empowerment Conference, which would be, you got your copy. The Empowerment Conference, which will be coming around next year for the third installment of the conference, focused on empowerment for men, leadership development, economic development, and those type of things. And overall, I'm a social scientist, young Black man from Jamaica, born in Jamaica, came up here when I was 7 years old. And I'm just trying to make my mentors and my ancestors happy.
Well, I love it. So definitely fellow Yachty. What part of Jamaica? I
was born in Trelawney, moved to Kingston, and then came here to the States.
No way. Yeah. So my dad and my sister lives in Trelawney. So my family's from Trelawney.
Really?
I was born in St. Anne's Bay. Mm-hmm. So Trelawney, St. Anne's.
We might be cousins.
We might be.
We're gonna run the map. We got to do this tree. We got to talk some more. Run this family tree. Be funny. Listen, it will be too funny if we happen to be related. Because Trelawney ain't that big. Everybody ain't about 10 families up there, and everybody belong to one of the families, kind of thing. So.
I know. Well, cool. I mean, we could be related to Usain Bolt.
That's true too. Yeah, that's true too. That's true.
So listen, I got your book. Let's Get Married and Do Everything Except Make It Last.
Yes.
Let's talk about before I get into the specific questions that I have. Let's talk about this title.
Yeah. Oh, the title. So
yeah.
I have an event coordinated with the person who inspired me with the title. That's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. We haven't set a date yet, but we've mapped it out. The title came from another poet on the spoken word scene who has a poem with the formula of this title, right? Let's do something. Let's get involved in something and do the opposite, right? Is basically the formula. And when I heard their poem, which really I thought was gripping, it was a great poem. I wanted to write what I initially called like a response poem, but it really wasn't a response poem. It was really just my version of the poem that said, hey, you know, me being that they were single at the time, and the poem talked about doing everything as a married couple except getting married, right? And the guy can always use the excuse, well, I didn't follow through or do this because we're not married, even though they might live together, have kids together. Their whole life is structured around what a married couple would look like, but they're doing everything except getting married. So for me, it was being married at the time. It was as if I had gotten married and was doing everything except making it last. And so I first wrote a poem, but I didn't think the poem really gave justice to the point, to the perspective I was trying to get at. And so it was just dropped in my spirit. Instead of making it a poem, make it a book. And here we are. Yeah. And this was like back in 2015.
Wow. Well, I tell folks sometimes it took me, it was 6 years before I published my book. So before
this was about 4.5 years on and off.
Yeah, exactly. So by the time when the concept materialized, it was about 6 years later before it's finally published and out to the public. So you take your time and you make it fit. For me, it had to feel right. It had to feel like the right time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So your book addresses quite a few things. But the first one I want to talk about, because as a single woman, what is it that men want?
The same things women want. It really is that simple, right? I think
is it that
women
simple? Is it really that simple?
It is that simple in the terms that we mirror each other. You know, we want ultimately the same things. How we arrive to the conclusion is going to look different for everybody. But everybody is saying, it's like everybody is saying, I want a cake or this type of a meal. But, you know, where you choose to harvest, plant, grow, purchase, who the manufacturers are, where you get your produce from, right? All of that, the process tends to look different, but we all are saying we want the same thing. I mean, so men want to be loved. Men want to feel cherished and they have hopes and dreams. They want to be catered to. They want security. They want, you know, a lot of, I think the difference that happens is women are more vocal about one side of the coin. Men are vocal about their needs from another side of the coin. But every coin has two sides, and we need the coin. So you actually need those things that are just as intrinsic values as the external values as well. So men want to be loved, cherished, honored, cared for, protected. I mean, take protected for an example. You would rarely hear a man say, I want to feel protected. It's nomenclature to women. But in reality, men want to feel protected as well. The same way women want to feel protected. Physically, emotionally, financially, the works.
So I guess my follow-up question to that is, when men get that, all of what you just said, because I know women like myself who are nurturing, are loving, are supportive, gives that whole kit and caboodle that you just talked about, including the kit part. But anyways,
the caboodle and the kit.
But you get all of that. And yet still, it seems like it's not enough. Yet still, one can't be monogamous, one or is super unappreciative or takes it for granted until that woman then says, I've had enough. I'm moving on.
I think my response to that takes on a spiritual connotation. I think there was, as it is biblical in the Garden of Eden, which I think is more metaphoric than actual. I think there was a time and space that the Garden of Eden speaks to as being centered and whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a disruption in which made us off-centered and put us in parts. So, like you said, a person can get something and not know what they have because they're still developing themselves and knowing their wholeness and being centered. Someone said to me one time that you can never be the right person for the wrong person, and which means you could give them heaven, earth, moon, mountain, stars, whatever it is that we think they should, that we're capable of giving. And it will be as if you just, all you did was just put a paper clip on a sheet of paper for them. It's just not that big of a deal. Right. So I think part of the process in searching is being able to acknowledge for yourself and have that and have it confirmed in the other person that there's a sense of wholeness, a sense of completeness, a sense of understanding, a sense of self-love that makes the person centered in who they are. And because two centered people, right, there's a likelihood of that having more prosperity to it. I also just think that the time that we live in is really confusing. If you really want me to be honest with you.
Okay, let's talk about that.
I think 2020, I think the 21st century is just confusing for people. I think we are experiencing a paradigm shift in what relationships look like and how they're built. I think we have a new woman in the 21st century, and I write about that in the book. I think two things for men and for women. On the women's side, I think women are learning how to navigate and adapt to being this new woman, especially the Black woman. And I think Black men are also learning how to be a Black man in this 21st century in response to this thriving, well-to-do, educated Black woman. And then at the same time, at an all-time high, you have thought culture. People just thoughting it up. And that thought culture is real because social media, popular culture has given just more space and room for all kind of shenanigans, right? So
what do you mean by thought culture?
Thought culture, you have the IG models who's popping it, who's twerking it. You have Instagram. So for example, women expose themselves more or are more sexually liberated, if we want to call it that, right? In their expression of self. But also what you find happening at the same time is in that expression of self, you also have this, it has become commerce for some women. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
I understand it, but I'm gonna pause you right there. Who do you think feeds into that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a market. I mean, you got to have buyers and sellers.
Right. So who do you think, because we're gonna get back to the book in a second, but I want to touch on this because it goes to, and I haven't watched the Netflix movie, but it goes to, I read some commentary about the Cuties show, for example. I don't know if you watched it. Everybody want to cancel Netflix, but I read an article from the writer of the show and where her perspective was coming from. And I can relate to what she wrote as far as the perspective on why she wrote the show. Now, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen how they casted it or anything like that, but I just saw the premise of the show. And you talk about this thought culture. And what I want to say is that, number one, I think for years, men in particular have celebrated thought culture. Men in particular subscribe to the likes of the sexual expressions of women, right? And as whether you're a young girl who is coming of age and trying to figure yourself out and trying to figure out why Billy didn't like me in class. I like
Right.
Billy, but Billy ain't like me back. Or whether you're a grown ass woman, excuse me, French, and you wondering why Joe ain't like you back. Whatever it is, right? But when you look at what Joe likes, right, or what he gets excited about, or who he associates with, or who he and his boys high five it up at, and it's the chick on Instagram that's bearing all, then what it creates a psychological. And I know, don't get me wrong, because everybody's gonna say, well, you got to know your worth and you got to know your value.
No. You're not off kilter. You're not off kilter. I mean, so we want a certain result, right? We want a certain level of attention and validation, and that's only human. Okay.
Right.
But what I think happened is this. It's not so much that men celebrate and respond. I think that's more for what came first, chicken or egg type of argument. What happens is we have a culture and we have a systemic issue that perpetuates itself. And I think that's more of an accurate reflection of what's happening, because what you have are women who now perpetuate the cycle, even if it was that's what men like, that's what women perpetuate. But then by perpetuating that, it teaches young boys that that's what they should like, and it's teaching young girls that's how they should act.
Right.
So we both get, the big premise of my book ultimately becomes this: we are co-conspirators in this together. And as much as we can point and say, well, men have done this and women have done that, we're equal. I think we're equally to blame in what our framework of life looks like, especially with wearing our young adults and even what we look like in adulthood. So I don't think it becomes just what men do. I think we all are part of this particular cycle, because because on the other side, you have men who are against or who don't promote, right? And women who are against. So it almost becomes like the forces of good and evil, and we're always at war in trying to trump the other.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I think that, but I wanted to make the point that it just, women being quote unquote thoughts or thoughting themselves out on social media, whatever the case is, did not just show up overnight and do that, right? And they have to have an audience in order for it to thrive. So I think there is a responsibility on both genders. I think that, and I always say that women, we do carry some level of power in what we do. We drive what you guys respond to. I do wholeheartedly believe that. I go back to when I was a teenager, and I remember it was like it was a thing like, no, we're not having sex unless we're together for like 6 months or a year or whatever the case was. If you were sexually active, right? But it was as if that was a consistent message for girls to boys. So boys knew they had to wait on some level. And if they weren't waiting for that girl, there was the quote unquote hoe that every boy would kind of go and knock off. But everybody knew she was out, quote unquote, right?
Right.
So, but the standard for girls at the time was that you were not going to just be out here having sex with whatever boy was your quote unquote boyfriend. And
but I think the standard is contained to your community, right?
It could be, but at least it was a standard, right? It was even if you go into, and I know this isn't a show for it, it's probably Pajama Juice Jam, but even if you go into the normalization of, let's just say, oral sex from the 90s to present, even if you just talk about that, it wasn't a normalized thing. It was a standard. There was a standard around it at that time. And a lot of times women drove that standard, right? So I think at some point in society, the standards have changed universally. Now, I'm not saying all, but it's changed universally. We have come into a swipe left, swipe right culture. We have come into a microwave culture where everybody want to fall in love, including self, in 2 days. We have come into a culture where it's a hookup culture. So it's things have definitely changed over the decades, right? Gender roles has changed, and I want to touch on that with you because I think that's a very important topic. And I don't care what race you are. I don't care what sexual orientation you are, because even in the LGBTQ community, there are challenges when it comes to gender roles, even though they're same gender, right? So let's talk about gender roles and how, like you said, you were touching on it a little bit on how it's evolved and how there's this new woman and how men are having a hard time responding to this new woman. Why is that?
Well, I think we're having a hard time responding to each other.
Okay.
So at a social level, economics is power. And so historically, men have had the economic power. Now in the 21st century, women, the population of women is greater than men. There are more women in the workforce. There are more educated women than there are men, especially in the Black community. And you have, and then when you take into consideration just the diaspora of Black people as a whole, and how I believe there's been a systematic approach to how we undermine men and how we undermine women, and that has looked different for the both of us. You still are standing here in a world where more than 50% of men who are incarcerated, right, look Black, where the most educated group of people on the planet statistically are Black women. So you have a very different world that we live in, and because economics drives power in our capitalistic country, women are now working, women are now making money, in a lot of instances are making more money than Black men. So you have this idea of, or this identity crisis among some men, because they no longer have capital as a power to negotiate. And if you go back 50, 60, 70, 80 years, when men were more well-to-do in general than women economically, well, women had the lure of their feminine wiles, right? Their ability to be a woman and to be feminine was part of their power. And they were able to attract a man, and there was this exchange. I mean, higher education historically, women went off to college to find a well-to-do man, because well-to-do men could afford to go to college. But now that playing field, or that exchange, has tremendously changed. Women now have economic power, and they have their womanly wiles. They still get to be a woman, right? But now men have less economic power, and now they're responding to a different kind of woman. And I think the woman is as much trying to understand herself in that space as men are trying to understand how to respond to women in that space. And I think it's very unsettling for a lot of men. So
how do you fix that? Is there a fix?
I think there is a fix. My book offers a fix, and the fix is, be adamant about this. We gotta stop using money as the litmus for defining masculinity, headship, and leadership, and begin to look at relationships, especially marriages, in terms of oneness. The challenge that I see with women is that they want to have it both ways, and you can't. Meaning, they want to have all of the upward mobility that comes with the 21st century, but they also want to reach back to the 1950s and pull on traditional roles that are convenient to them and apply that at the same time. And they want to live they want to exist in both spaces at the same time. And I think that's part of the challenge, and that's very difficult to do.
So why can't we? So you're telling me that I can't be this successful entrepreneur, community leader that earns a living, maybe more than my significant other, and still want to be protected, cared for, provided for, still be able to, if for whatever reason I need to stay home with the kids and take a leave of absence from my well-to-do job or career. You mean to tell me I can't, you're telling me that I can't tap into that?
I'm saying the conversation that being had around it is a very off-kiltered conversation. I'm not saying that you can't have those things. I'm saying how we're having the conversation is misleading and it's conflicting.
But give me an example.
So for example, the fact that, or when a woman is now going to say to a man that, well, yes, she's well to do, but I still expect you to provide for me. I think the conversation that's incongruent in that is, one, when we talk about provision, most of the times we're talking about it from a financial aspect. That's the heavy part of the conversation is financially provide. Two, so if we're talking about provision from being a financial matter and the woman makes more money, why is her vernacular still in terms of keeping with these traditional concepts of provision that I need him to provide for me? Yet his salary is less than hers in this well-to-do society of women. So even that right there is off-kiltered. Now,
but it's not. It's not. I'm gonna pause you there. Why? Because I'm gonna tell you why it's not. Just from my own experience. I have to say my experience, right? From my serial dater experience. Okay. When I've met said guy who claims to want to be a provider, but for whatever reason feels that he can't compete or whatever. So then I'm left behind because he claims he wants to be a provider. So if I'm asking you to be a provider, then let's put my money to the side if that's the problem, and then provide then. So how is it? I just think that how is it that a man still wants to mentally, still want to mentally, the traditional man still want to mentally provide, but has an issue if the woman who is doing okay, doing well, also wants him to provide? Isn't that what he wants? Isn't that a part of his masculinity? Isn't that what makes him feel like he's the leader in the relationship and doing
no,
his
because no, that's what's all cryptic about this, because we keep on centering the anchor of all of this comes back to money. So
but it doesn't just be money.
But I'm not talking. But okay, so I think you're talking about a couple of things at once. If you're talking about a guy, and this is where, again, for men who think this way, this is why the whole boat is rocking and it's off kiltered. They need this development. Is if they're going to define provision by their finance instead of by their leadership, then they're missing the boat in their role of provision.
Right.
If women are going to define provision in 70% of the conversation being about finances instead of leadership, then she's also missing the boat of what provision is. See, I, as a man, I don't provide for any woman, and I will not be under this understanding. I'm not looking to provide for her financially. I'm looking to provide for her as a leader. Now, as a leader, when I lead, I address issues, or I stop holes that I plug holes that need to be plugged, right? I devise a plan. I take a look at our resources, and I make sure that I'm using them and I'm adapting them as best as possible. So how much you make is not going to make a difference to me. You can make $500,000 and I can make $50,000. But if you are in my space as my woman and we are together and ideally married, we make $550,000. That's because oneness becomes oneness. But I think the problem that happens is men do not know how to necessarily respond to the power dynamics that has changed, and to the change in definition of what masculinity looks like, because historically we keep on defining it through capital, both men and women.
So can women lead in a relationship, or should women lead in a relationship?
Well, that's a whole nother part of this misconception. We keep misdefining leadership.
Okay.
I 99% of the people, when we talk about relationships, are misdefining leadership. Leadership and unfortunately, the Bible does this, and I take the Bible to task in my book with how we use scriptures to we use scriptures to practice hegemony, power, and uphold patriarchy. The problem, again, when we talk about leadership is we keep on wanting to make leadership gender-based when we look at it in terms of a relationship. However, in business, the light bulb goes off. We suddenly know what leadership is. Matter of fact, we even have affirmative action that even talks about how leadership is supposed to be across the board. Men, women, gays, straights, everybody should be able to apply for a position and lead and be respected. But suddenly, when it comes to a relationship, we're crippled. We don't know what to do anymore. Nobody knows how to be a leader. Only a man. It's stupid. It's stupid and it's annoying. Forgive me because I'm annoyed by it. Why is it stupid and annoying? Because of this. Leadership is a set of skills. It is not gender-based. It is skill-based. Mm-hmm. So I do not believe that a man is the leader of the marriage or of a relationship, nor do I think that the woman is the leader. I think you lead. Leadership is a skill-based quality. So what an effective leader does is I rely on the strength of your leadership in areas that it's your strength. You rely on the strength of my leadership in areas that is my strength. And then we continue to work toward goals and take initiative, delegate, effective communication, time management, whatever it is, organizational skills, those are all leadership skills. Can a woman deploy them in a relationship? Absolutely. That makes her a leader. It's not about being the leader of the man or the man being the leader of the woman. It's about them being the leader of the vision of the relationship. Stop trying to lead people and lead vision so we can stop this stupid conversation about leading a man or leading a woman. And so it becomes so genderfied. Everything that we're doing is so genderfied. We need to start having plans and vision. Lead the vision. I hope I'm making sense because you get what I'm saying. You lead the vision. You lead the goal. My children are leaders. Everybody in my house is a leader. Point blank period. I don't care your age. Now, because I am my children's father and I have more breadth and scope and knowledge and experience, then I'm in my proper administration of my leadership. I give them and I teach them, but I give them what they're able to manage. But then you are responsible for that. And then when I step into that setting of something that they're responsible for, I'm asking them to tell me, how did it go? What should I do? How would you like me to handle it? I'm here to support you. So if I can mentor them, they can mentor me back. If I could lead them, they could lead me back. I'm not leading children. I'm leading missions and visions and goals. And if we can get the focus off of gender, we'll do so much better for it.
Okay. So the role of religion, politics, economics, and socialization in relationships.
That's what this book is doing. It's talking about the intersection of those things. At the intersection of those things is where conflict occurs, because your socialization is going to tell you. So you have a line that runs, and this is your religion. You have another line that runs that says this is your economics. You have another line that says this is your socialization or your culture, what your beliefs are, right? Just your moral, your values. You have another line that's running, this is your politics. So when they all intersect, that's where conflict starts to happen, because that's part of what we're confronting right now is this intersection of women, gender, economics, her income, in relationship to another gender, another income, in relationship to her religion or her politics, have to come to a space of homeostasis, have to come to a space of they all equal out and balance out together. But there's a lot of friction because capital is power, because people have economic power or religious power or even their own personal power. They don't know what to do. That's why everybody is in this paradigm shift that I refer to. We're still trying to figure it out. It's like men and women, when it comes to relationships, are at this big round table and we're negotiating. What does it look like? What does a man look like in the 21st century?
Oh boy. Mm-hmm.
And women are like, well, what is a woman like? And women are asking the question, well, why can't I be provided for, but but I can make more money, but why can't he still provide for me? Because that's what men are supposed to do. And the men are like, but wait, I need money to provide, but you make more money. So providing by way of money can't be the only way I provide. And then you have some men who are like, man, I'm not man enough because I'm not making enough money. So now I can't be with a woman like that. So they're conflicted. So a lot of people are experiencing this internal conflict because they're trying to figure out a way to balance the intersection of these different components. But again, that's where my book comes in. And my book offers what I think is a very relevant, a very practical, real, and attainable solution to resolving the conflict that occurs at that intersection.
Okay. So before we dive into politics, tell us where we can get your book. I mean, I know where I got mine from Amazon, but tell us where we can get your book. Is it on Audible? What formats is it in, etc.?
Bittersweet news. Currently, the book is available wherever books are sold: Goodreads, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. The bitter part is, but sweet nonetheless, is apparently I've sold out of the first run that Amazon printed.
Oh.
And so the book is just like on back order. And I'm waiting for it to repopulate on all those platforms. They're down on all the platforms. So that's good.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. People have been like, their response about the book has been amazing. The content, people are very taken back by the transparency and the openness about it. And people like the content. They really, it makes sense. And I've said that for a couple of years when I've talked about the book coming, because people on my social media platform think I'm just like weird or crazy or just I'm from some other planet. But they read the book and it makes sense. And they've been saying that, you know what, it makes sense. It's making me rethink how I think about things. So it is available on Amazon, on Goodreads.com, and other platforms. And hopefully by next week, they'll be up and ready for people to start going out and get them. And you could always go to www.adriancarterspeaks.com to get a copy of the book by going to my website and letting it launch you to the different locations.
Awesome. So congratulations on selling out. Congratulations on, I've been seeing you make your rounds on social media. So thanks for joining me on Tea with Ann Marie. So politics. We got an election coming up in November. What do you think this election is about? In your opinion, what is it about? What's going to get you to the polls to vote?
You know, I think just so much has been going on in the world. And when I say the world, just in our nation and in our local communities as it relates to politics and the relevance of it. I think we're going to have a historic turnout of voters this year, because I think people better understand, and especially Black people. I think our ancestry, for some reason, doesn't evoke a deep sense of political participation. I think because we come from a different background, and our justice system, our African roots within our justice system as Africans, looks different from what the European system looks like. But I do think people are going to turn out in droves. I think a lot of people are, what I've liked that has happened on the local front is you have a lot of newer faces that have jumped into the political fray. So that is mixing things up. And then I think at the national level, I think our VP candidate actually has stirred things up just as much as our current president, seated president, has stirred things up. And I think you're going to get a response to that. Yeah. Right. So I think both Black people, white people, Hispanic people, a very important part of the voting population, Muslim people, are going to respond to that shakeup, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so do you think, is this is this a election that's going to be, in the past we've had elections that's issue based, the economy, healthcare, things like that. From my understanding, for the Black community, this is a race election. Do you agree?
Right. I agree, and that's why I think we're going to have the type of turnout, that we've had before. I mean, Obama's turnout was historic, but I think this may even trump the turnout that we see. No pun intended, right? Trump, right? The turnout that we're going to see that happened before. The racial aspect of it is a huge component. I think the way that our seated president has responded to racial issues has shown him to be someone that you probably don't want to lead on that particular front. You do have a side of, you do have the business people who talk about unemployment and what the tax code changes have been, and who applaud the seated president for that in a lot of ways.
What business people doing that? You must be in the corporations.
Well, yeah.
Oh, because I'm like, not the small businesses.
No, not the small business. No, not the small business.
Yeah, that didn't help any small business.
So, so those big wigs are going to, are going to do what they do as a machine. But yeah, race is a huge part of this. Is a huge part of this.
How do we get Black men to turn out more?
Oh man, that's been the question. I've heard that one asked. Yeah, so I've never really delved into looking at that topic and really studying it, but that's been asked of me recently. And how do we get Black men out? And I was trying to just think, like, what would get me out? Because even for myself, I'm very I think voting is important. I'm going to go and vote and look at the local people and see what's going on. And there are a couple folks who I have in mind about certain things, but I don't necessarily feel like the issue as a Black man that these are issues that involve me, so to speak. How though? It's not in a very direct way. But not in a very direct way. But no, I know it does, right? Yeah. I know it does.
No, I know you do, but for a Black man to think, I want to respond to what you're saying. For a Black man to think that the issues don't involve him directly. Let's take healthcare. A lot of Black men work jobs that are wage jobs, probably no benefits. And when don't go to the doctor a lot or enough, need to have regular checkups. I mean, look at Chadwick Boseman, who just passed away, right? At very young age, right? Healthcare is a huge issue when it comes to our community, making sure your kids have access to healthcare and Medicaid, making sure that you have access to affordable healthcare. Because if you're working a hourly wage job, for example, and they don't provide health insurance for you, the health insurance can become very costly, which is why a lot of Black people don't have it, right? So your alternative is something like the ACA healthcare. So healthcare, right? Even though this isn't a healthcare election, let's go back to race for a second. When we talk about race, when we talk about police brutality, when we talk about whether even just community vigilantes that commit crimes against Black people, particularly Black men who are a threat, quote unquote, right? When you talk about a justice system, both federally, statewide, and locally, that impacts Black men tremendously. We talk about profiling, we talk about law enforcement. That impacts Black men directly. And that's just a couple of examples, right? The economy, jobs. When we talk about who's on the front line of COVID-19, Our delivery drivers that work for Amazon and all these places, FedEx, UPS, a lot of them are Black. Our frontline workers in whether it's construction is stopped, right? Hispanic,
Right.
Black men, right? That are doing the labor. When it comes to service, retail, jobs like that, Black men and women, Hispanic men and women. So they're the first ones impacted when the death toll rises for COVID or has risen. Black people, Hispanic people. There was an article last week that talked about the disproportionate number of children that have died from COVID or that have been impacted have been Hispanic, 40 some percent Hispanic, 20 something, almost 30% Black kids. So these issues relate to us more directly than we think. Yeah, it may not in your day-to-day life, you probably are not thinking like right off top that it affects you, but it does.
Right. I definitely think it does. And I know it does. I think so. But this is, I think, is the difference, right? So let me ask you a question. Why the question on the focus of specifically getting Black men out to the polls?
Because the numbers have shown, especially since definitely in 2016 for sure, our numbers overall as a community dropped, right? But when it comes to voter turnout, Black women carry that vote. And then I'm talking about from eligible Black voters, right? Black women carry that number in such high numbers, and we're so much more engaged in the political process. We're engaged in volunteering, in donating, and whatever. So I think I'm trying to understand, how do we get more Black men just as fired up, just as engaged, seeing that these issues are so important to them and the community as a whole?
So, okay. If I look at Joe Biden's website, or if I look at the platform, hear me out, because I think this may sound, it may, what? This doesn't make sense, but I think it does. I don't. What I think happens for Black men, and I'm. This is just a hypothesis. Black men are not reflected as an agenda item. Black men are part of the robust conversation of needs. But you will more easily find, especially in this climate, you'll find, and I'm not knocking it because it's necessary, but when you create a system where, okay, we have funding for Black women, there's a minority business grant for Black women, there is this particular agenda item for women, right? So what happens is women, and rightfully so, in a lot of instances, have been targeted to receive political support, and however that may look. One of the reasons why I started the Empowerment Conference to make this connect is because I saw the plethora of women empowerment programs, whole slew of them. Women's empowerment brunch, dinner, midnight snack, meet me at 3 a.m. Women's empowerment prayer line at 6 a.m. You know, she is I am her, we are together, empower her, empower she, Shempowerment. I could keep going. Come on, it did not.
I got you.
Right? 360. How many days of the year? 365 days. 365 women's empowerment functions. But no one ever said to men that we couldn't do the same thing. Right? No one said, men, you can't do it. And so I felt that it was very important for men to be empowered, because if women are doing all of the self-work and men are not doing the self-work, then you have this more matured woman with this less matured man, and then people are trying to get together, right? All of this self-development. But my point is, our culture, and I've said this before, I believe that we're in the age of women. We have turned the needle to really focus in on the needs of women and balancing the scale because of the historical injustices women have suffered. So it's very necessary. But what we're doing is we're going from, if you will, from arcs to arcs. We're making very sharp turns. And in making a sharp turn, it may appear, and again, this is just a hypothesis, it may appear as if, yes, Black men have needs, and their needs are met in the more robust conversation about political topics, but there's not an agenda item that says this is specifically for the Black man. Now, maybe if there was an agenda item that said Black men receive this specifically, now of course you benefit. I mean, if HBCUs are going to have those debt wiped away if you went there and you were a Black man that went to a HBCU, then boom, it's going to benefit you, right? Healthcare, changes in healthcare, boom, it's going to benefit you. But again, there are very specific things that are slated for women in general, Black women specifically, but you don't find that same level of attention, so to speak, on Black men. My overall thing with that, though, is in general, in some instances, and I've heard, just testing the temperature of what men are saying, I just wonder sometimes if men have felt left out of growth and development, changes in our society, because Black men get roped under being a man. And so we think that Black men are just afforded the same liberties as men, but really the difference is the opportunities for white men is different from what it is for Black men. Just thought.
So let me comment on your thought. And I, by any means, I hope this does not come off as any type of attack or anything on Black men, because I love Black men. Okay. So let's talk about the nature of why you see so much empowerment for women, why you see so much dedicated for Black women. Let's just say corporate structure. And it can be corporate structure, it can be the political landscape, it can be all of it, right? Black women are at the bottom. Period, point blank, has always been considered last. So number one, because we, as a person, first we're Black, then we're a woman, or first we're a woman, then we're Black, however you want to put it. Either way, as Black women, we've always had two knocks against us. So when we get hired into an organization, for example, first of all, that Black man traditionally has gotten hired quicker than a Black woman. Traditionally. Business deals, and I witness this all the time. Black men can cut and make business deals quicker than a Black woman. A Black man can grow his business faster than a Black woman. Okay? So the playing field has never been equal for Black women and Black men. That's number one. And it's not to pit us against each other. I'm just stating facts, because just like the traditional white male and white female structure, where white women came way later to the table of opportunities than white men, you got to think, we just talked about the women's suffrage, right? Just 100 years. The white woman was able to vote legally before the Black woman, even though women got the right to vote, but not a Black woman, right? So for years, until this day, Black women are still trying to break through, not a glass ceiling, it's more like a damn concrete roof that we're trying to break through. So that's why you see empowerment events for Black women. That's why you see funds for Black women-owned businesses, et cetera. And it's not to say that there shouldn't be anything like that for Black men and Black businesses. I think there should be, right? And I think we're waking up to that more and more now, where it's Black business in general that companies are looking at, or contracting opportunities, et cetera. But women just disproportionately continue, and that's why I think we've banded together more as women to push the envelope to strive for more equality and equity when it comes
Right.
to women, and in particular Black women getting an opportunity or getting a shot. So I think that's why you see what you're doing, and
I agree with you though.
Yeah, and I applaud you for doing what you do. And I think because we have just been so tired of being marginalized as a Black woman that we're like, screw this. We're going to kick the damn door down to get what we want. We're going to go to extra mile. We're going to go get whatever degrees we got to get. We're going to start whatever businesses we got to start. We're going to learn how to play golf. Whatever we got to do as women, we're going to command a seat at the damn table. That's what we've done as women. And then Black women in particular have said enough is enough. I remember going to an event where there was three speakers, and they were talking about the glass ceiling, the glass ceiling, the glass ceiling, whatever. And there were three white women that were speaking, and it was probably 200 plus women at the luncheon, and it was only out of the 200 plus maybe 20 of us, so 10% of the room had Black women, if it was even that many of us, right? And I remember raising my hand saying, hey, so as you're going and you're advocating for women in your organizations to grow and develop, et cetera, how many of you are consciously advocating for women of color? Because when you're breaking a glass ceiling, we got a whole nother layer up there, right? So, and none of them could answer me. The room just got silent. They had
white women issues is not Black women's. Black women's issues is not white women's issues. Like they don't consider Black women's issues as part of their issue.
Right. So I think for us as Black women, whether it's coming to voting or, like I said, all the other pieces before, we have just said enough is enough, and we're not going to wait any longer for someone to give us a seat at the table or to do whatever. We're going to be out here. We're going to be vocal. We're going to vote. We're going to do whatever we got to do. And I think it's time, and I love what you're doing with your men's conference. It's time that we see Black men do the same thing, right?
Right.
Rise up. come out here,
but it's
to make your table, like Tyler Perry said, make your own table or whatever, but also exercise your right to vote. Make sure you're vocal. Make sure you're active.
But I think it's a psychological thing too, though. That I just want to jump in and say that I think it's a psychological thing, because we've seen. Think about when President Obama, came out of his presidency. Oh man, what did we call it? We had a hashtag where we were saying that whites were like retaliating to Obama's presidency by ensuring they voted Trump in. And so when you also look at white men throughout these last couple of decades have grown in what is being dubbed as angry white men, because they've seen the landscape change for themselves as well, very drastically. But I think when we talk about Black men and we talk about the issues, I think it's just really psychological. It's like we're present because the issues affect us. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But psychologically, but when you're no longer appear to have presence, right, in the conversation in the same way, even though you're included in a more general way. And I think white people are, if you will, suffer from this the greatest. So by seeing people be affluent, Black people and Muslim people, when the immigrants come in, I think all of that enrages white people to a certain extent, because they're seeing access and opportunity that they have traditionally had, historically had, however they got it. They don't want to, sometimes they don't want to have how they got to a conversation, but because they see a challenge in certain ways, then they think that their identity is being impacted in the outlook of how they have themselves. So I don't blame Black women. I think Black women have done what they're supposed to have done and should do, and I think y'all should continue to do it. But I think though, I'm just hypothesizing that Black men because they may not see their identity reflected in the issues as visible as some other groups of people, then they may not feel as endeared to the process. And therefore you don't see them as vocal to the process. So I think how we can combat that is probably just how we change, how we have the conversations about the issue. Maybe when having a conversation, imagine this. I'll tell you this. While I'm going to go vote and participate, I'll tell you this much. This would get my attention as a Black man. If one of our political leaders was having a conversation and was talking about healthcare, and then they were to say, Black men, you're going to benefit from this because statistically this happens to you and this happens to you, and this is how this particular bill or change or addendum will assist you. I'm like, oh, what you saying now? It may get my attention a little bit more. It's not that it's not there, as just, is there visibility in the conversation about the topics? I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure it out along with you.
No. I get what you're saying. And I understand that there should be, being on the political consulting side, I love that feedback, because that gives the feedback that when we're talking about how different issues, whether it's local, state, federal, impact the population as a whole, being able to drill down to those statistics and how it impacts a particular group, especially those groups that we want to have a bigger turnout and bigger involvement. So I do agree. And I think that I know that the Biden campaign, Joe Biden started with GZ, these shop talks, and hopefully through these shop talks that they're doing, there'll be the conversation like we're having, but from the male perspective, where more men will be able to say, well, I want to know how this particularly impacts me. But beyond what you're already pitching, this is what I'm actually dealing with. So how do you create policy and changes around what I'm actually dealing with? I think that personally, I think that there definitely needs to be more forums for men, Black men in particular, to be more vocal, to speak out to things that do impact you as Black men. And then we can say, well, is there a policy issue around this? If it's not, maybe it should be. Or what is the current policy? Should it be changed? Should we modify it? Okay, then who do we talk to about that? What legislative body is responsible for that? So I think there's education, there's dialogue, but if we don't even know, it's kind of like even going back to the healthcare issue. Men in general don't like to go to the doctor, but will suffer in silence with whatever they're dealing with, right? So we definitely have to break the silence of men, and Black men in particular. And I don't even know if Hispanic men even speak out. Men just don't even like to talk in general. Let's just face that. Like, that's just a trait of most men that are just not that vocal about whatever, expressing whatever. But I think being able to have forums like Shop Talk, or like we're doing now, but on a larger scale with more men at the table, I think it's important when we're trying to get to the issues that impact you and that will make you say, I have to vote, not just in the general election, right? But I have to vote in the county elections. I have to vote in my municipal election, because if we're talking about police and law enforcement, well, that happens at the local level. That's local, right? So you got to get out and vote in the local election. So I think we definitely need to, and I don't know if you cover all of this at your men's conference, but if not, it definitely should be a part of that platform, because we need to hear your voices. We need to understand your concerns.
Yeah, I totally agree. And activism, it's LEAD. It's the Empowerment LEAD Conference. LEAD is an acronym for Leadership, Economic, and Activism Development. So core to what we do is talking about leadership and within the community at the political level. In fact, Dwight Bullard came to our first conference and presented on some local issues and whatnot. So I'm right there with you. I totally agree with you. And we'll continue, at least on my end, doing our part with the Empowerment Conference.
Good, good. Well, I won't keep you much longer, Mr. Carter. It's been an amazing discussion. I think that we want to, more importantly, let's make sure folks get out to vote. You can request your vote by mail ballots up until, I believe, October 21st or something like that. I have to get the exact date, but you still have time to request your vote by mail ballot. The last day to register to vote is October 5th. So there's still time to get registered or update your voter registration if you've moved or anything. Early voting starts October 19th through November 1st. So you can vote early and not have to wait on election day. If you do a vote by mail ballot, you can turn that ballot in at the early voting locations, any one of them, or you can turn it in at your supervisor of elections office if you don't trust the mail. Ooh, do you know the post office been delayed by like 2 weeks? So folks waiting on, which is crazy. If you're waiting on a check, if you're waiting on anything,
they know what they're doing.
It's just there, right?
They know what they're doing
out there in post office land. So if you can take your vote by mail ballots into the supervisor elections office or to a voting location during early voting, and of course election day. So less is 20 for 2020. Get 20 of your friends to commit to voting. Get 20 of your family members, if you have 20 family members, to commit to voting. Your colleagues, co-workers, neighbors. We have to get the vote out in November. Of course, for my Palm Beach County folks that are listening, I am on the ballot for Palm Beach Soil and Water Conservation District, seat 2. So please go all the way to the bottom of the ballot. And please, I ask for your vote and your support as I look to bring a fresh voice and new leadership to agriculture, water conservation, and environmental matters. So looking to diversify that area a little bit more because it's all important to us. So so next week I'm going to have an exclusive sit down with Palm Beach County's Sheriff, Rick Bradshaw. I'm looking forward to our discussion about a whole lot of everything. From where he stands with, law enforcement, police brutality, what changes is happening within our sheriff department, what changes has happened, school safety, all types of things. So I look forward to the discussion. So make sure you guys tune in next Friday at noon as I have an exclusive sit down with our Sheriff Rick Bradshaw. So should be a pretty interesting, lively discussion to see where he stands on these issues.
Right.
So Adrian,
this is awesome stuff.
Oh yeah, tell our audience once again where to find your book. Let's Get Married and Do Everything But Make It Last. But we really do want to make it last.
Right. So if you hold the book up again, right, you'll notice that there are actually 2 titles in one. And I'm not talking about the subtitle. Right. So the bolded side, there are bolded letters, and then there are letters that are not bolded. So if you read the bolded letters, you get a different title.
Yeah, Get Married and Make It Last.
Exactly. Right. So, it's a poem, So you can get the book on Amazon and on Goodreads.com, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. And like I said, you can go ahead and check the website out. I'm waiting for them to come back in stock, and so that we can continue the grind and continue the push to get the books into more people's hands. And you can always check me out at www.adriancarterspeaks.com.
All right. Well, we've definitely had some lively discussion for anyone who's tuning in. Go back to the beginning, and we've talked about gender roles, what men want, the roles of religion, politics, and economics and relationships. Of course, we talked about this upcoming election and what we got to do to get more Black men out to vote. So please go back and watch it from the beginning. But more importantly, share this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ann Marie Sorrell. Also, you can visit my website, annmariesorrell.com. And I would love your support. Again, if you're in Palm Beach County or anywhere, you can donate to my campaign at electannmariesorrell.com. today. So I look forward to you guys joining me again next week, Friday at noon, as I sit down with Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw. I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a wonderful weekend. Adrian, have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for tuning in.
You too, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend as well. Let that spirit of Friday marinate into your soul and enjoy your weekend.
TGIF.
Yes.